Hello, you hottie hot hotties. Welcome to a mini episode of Wild&T with Tony, Tara, Teddy, and Tawny. Okay, this little episode, we just wanted to touch on forms of communication. We, as sisters, have specific communication with each other, and it doesn't always translate outside of our communication with others. I think a big thing that I wanted to talk about is, I guess, the end of communication after the math or aftermath of communication is the forgiveness step. And what does forgiveness really mean? Because sometimes I feel like, is forgiveness forgetting? Is forgiveness no longer being hurt by that memory or that situation? What does forgiveness mean?
For me, it's really my really close friends when we've gotten over it, we've moved past it, and I'm like, remember that time that you're really big B, and then we laugh about it afterward.
Okay, so not being
like made my
triggered or hurt.
I'm just kidding. It's not all my friends. It's one in particular where we're like, oh my goodness, that was the worst. And yeah, no, we do that. But this was like years and years ago.
So Tawny's forgiveness is not forgetting. It's remembering and making a joke out of it.
Being able to laugh. Remembering and being able to laugh about. I mean, that could kind of be healthy.
Actually, it's kind of like that with my closest friends. I mean, it's not, everything, but we'll be like, oh my gosh, that was the worst. And then one of us is like, I'm so sorry. Another one's like, why? It's not a big deal anymore. So, I mean, it's personally, I don't necessarily forget when it comes to forgiveness, just because, and I don't mean it in like I'm going to hold that grudge forever and hold it against you if you bring it up ever again or do something similar. It's more of like it happened and I would just rather we not skirt around that topic, because that's when it gets awkward. But just kind of be like, this happened, we talked about it, we figured it out, we've gone over it, we've moved past it, and we either know that we just kind of like touch on it and move on, or we, but I don't like to just like hide it under the rug, pretend like it doesn't exist.
I think okay, so where you can acknowledge it and not be triggered, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's actually like a really good test for
people who you can keep being friends with, basically. Because like if you were to say something like that to me, I'd be like, yeah, that's not funny. We're not gonna talk about it. And I'd automatically be like, yeah, we're this is the friendship for us. But like it shows like for friendships that are important and necessary for you, like it's a good like weeding it out, basically, I guess.
I just hate pretending like things don't exist. I hate pretending like it never happened, because it did. But I'm also the type of person, if I do something, is, usually in an argument, you've both done things, and I'm the type of person that I would really just rather fix it. Whatever I did, let me just fix it and let me just do better. So that's why I personally am okay with bringing things up, as long as it's not like thrown in my face like over and over again, and it is at the point of forgiveness. But I think it has a lot to do with my ex, because he would throw things in my face. Like he'd be like, oh, I forgive you, and then throw it in my face. And so that was really hard. And so for me, it's, I don't know, almost like a trauma response, I guess, is I'm like, can we bring this up? And there's no hurt.
So you like test people by throwing it in their face, but like joking, and then you're like, have you moved on?
Yeah. You make it sound really unhealthy when you say that.
So it seems like forgiveness.
No, it's not.
But it seems like it can be different depending on if you're still friends with that person, if you still communicate with them, versus people who aren't in your life.
Yeah,
anymore,
and it depends,
right?
On the big time.
Yeah. Okay. So another communication hot topic is probably sarcasm. Honestly, I kind of am over people being sarcastic to me. I am one of those people that they're like, why do you have to always get offended? I do get easily offended by things that people think are funny just to be mean, and I don't find it funny. So sarcasm is something that I do, but never in, I don't know, I try to do it less in a mean way.
No, I have
Be
worked
vicious.
a lot to actually come off as obviously sarcastic because a lot of people do not get sarcasm, and it's sort of like I'm I'm trying to it's like Tawny's thing where I'm trying to point out, an obvious idiosyncrasy without being mean about it. But like I have to make it very obvious I'm being sarcastic so that people pick up on it instead of getting
Yeah.
upset.
It's kind of like you've done sarcasm right if people are laughing with you, rather than just being like oh dear, did she really mean that?
Yeah.
Kind of a
Yeah.
situation.
I learned with sarcasm that when I say like a really sarcastic joke, I have to be like jokes like at the end because I also have this weird thing with my voice that I will say something completely honestly and truthfully and not sarcastic at all, but it sounds very sarcastic to other people. So they look at me and they're like, "What?" And I'm like, they're like, "Ah," and I'm like, I was being serious. Like that wasn't a joke. I actually was being serious or yeah, like someone would ask a question like, "Oh, what's your favorite color?" And I'd be like, "Yellow." And they'd be like, "This is sarcastic." Like I can't tell.
Is it really?
I'm like, "No, that was just my voice. I'm so sorry."
You're
So
like, I just made an inflection for no reason. You're like mellow yellow. And they're like, did you just say that just to rhyme? Like why? And you're like, no, really, I just, just said it differently.
I feel like my sarcasm has gotten a lot better since like my high school days, but mostly it comes out around Aaron, and it's
Better as in
as in I'm
what?
not like it's not most of my conversations at this point.
Okay.
So I'm not always sarcastic anymore, but it's mostly when I ask Aaron a question, he goes, "Who, me?" And I go, "No, the cat." That's most of my sarcasm. So that's pretty much it these days.
I think this is an interesting question. When is it two-faced or fake to speak in a different manner, and when is it acceptable? I think this is so interesting, especially in relationships when guys are like, you're totally different around them. Your voice changes versus like with me, or even if you have friends like that or siblings. Like when I see like some of my siblings, like some of you guys, like talk to someone different, I'm like, excuse me? No, no, no. You don't talk like that in front of me around other people. Keep that crap to yourself. I don't want to see you change. Like, no, you only be your authentic self with me. You don't mess around like that.
Take your other personality back inside.
Yeah. Put that back.
This is a
How
dangerous
dare you
topic
be
for
vulnerable
me.
with anybody else?
Teddy feels attacked.
I don't want everyone knowing my secrets. Like,
But I feel like it's kind of funny how it is with our family because I feel like we are a little bit different at home around each other, which I'm sure plenty of people are. And then when people see that inner circle, they're like surprised. But also, it is a big thing. Some people act very differently around specific people. And is that fake? Is that fake?
No,
I
I-
think it depends.
I don't think so personally, because I feel like it's just the relationship. Like my relationship with my best friend since I was a year old is completely different than my relationship with somebody that I just met. I mean, it just really depends. I'm a whole other level of weird that other people do not need to see because they have not accepted me as a person just yet. Then she can see. But so I feel like it just depends on the relationship, like work friends, for example, or somebody like said somebody you just met, or like your friends. I mean, it depends on your relationship with these people and also where you grew up. Like, we have the California friends, and so you talk like Californian or
Well, it's like
Californian.
you can so easily recognize Californians without even realizing it. And it's because you're like on the same vibe somehow.
I know. Isn't that crazy? The wavelength that just happens, and you're like, oh wait, you're from California. Like I get it. Because and you
Mhm.
immediately have that bond. It's really weird. Even though, we're not Southern Californians or Northern Californians, but no matter what, you can still tell and you're like, you're different. Like me. Mhm.
Yeah,
Like you
like
can
me.
actually understand the voice inflections that they use too, and you're like, oh, I'm picking up on
Yeah.
the communication form.
That's funny.
Mhm. I have
I
seen, watched my friends who are good flirts. They're talking casual to you, and then a Hawkeye comes up, and all of a sudden you see this flip in their eyes, and you're like, "Oh, I'm about to witness a takedown." And all of a sudden they like turn on, and you see them suddenly go from like the easygoing friend to this hardcore flirter, and you're like, whoa, 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 okay, calm down, like I'm still here. But it's
that
actually pretty amazing to watch.
that
Tara,
or
what
the
was
opposite
that?
happens. That or the opposite happens in that like they turn from this really fun easy person to the super, super awkward, don't know what to do with themselves because this is
Yes.
them flirting. You're like, it's
Yeah.
a train wreck, but you can't not look. You're like,
And you're like, pull it together, man.
You get that secondhand cringe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Tara, it reminds me of that thing that I sent you. I know I'm hot, but I also know I'm not a full-time hot person. I'm hot when I want to be. I choose my own hours. I make my own schedule. I do freelance hotness.
It is
Yes,
so valid.
yes.
Oh my gosh.
That is so good, and I think it is perfect for when people are like, "Well, sometimes you wear makeup and you act like you are better than others, and sometimes you don't wear makeup and you're just a different person." And you're like, "Yeah, actually, what you wear can change your perception of yourself sometimes." And
Mm.
is that fake? Is that two-faced? Most of the time, I'd say no. There are some people who like to bend that rule, but I'd say most of the time, no.
it depends on intention. It just
Yeah.
depends on your intention going into like why are you acting this way? Is it because you're feeling comfortable or you're feeling uncomfortable or is it because, you have an objective, right?
Mm.
So, intention I think has a lot to do with it and unfortunately, a lot of the times you cannot tell someone's intention just by interacting with them. Not always.
I think that's an excellent point because I was gonna say like I was like it depends because I honestly think of like the movie Mean Girls, right? When she's like, "Oh, I
Good
love I
example.
love your
Beautiful.
bracelet. I love your skirt." And she turns around, she's like, "That was the most hideous thing I've ever seen." And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, don't be that person. Just don't say anything to them. If you don't like them, don't talk to them. Don't try to make yourself look like a different person so they don't see the real you, I guess.
Which is a point on one of our like next bullet points about being blunt. I mean, I think a lot of people confuse being blunt or I'm just being honest. And you're like, well, truly censorship is important because is what you're saying helping or is it hurting? Is it really necessary to say? Just because you have a thought doesn't mean you need to say it out loud. We don't all have Tourette's here, you know?
You
That's
can be blunt,
the
but
goal
be
of it.
tactful about it. Read the situation. Is it necessary? Will it help?
Is it just to relieve yourself or is it to help someone else?
Yeah. Are
And
you being
that's
honest
that's
or are you
something.
being mean?
Yeah, they're like, "Well, I just have this thought in my mind and I gotta get it out because I'm just being honest on what's going on in my head." And it's like sometimes
I hate that excuse. Also, I'm sorry, but the whole like speak your truth thing, I don't appreciate that phrase because that implies that there's multiple truths versus like your own side of the story. Like, I don't know. I just think the whole like speak your truth thing personally just feels like a way to excuse your behavior, your thoughts, things like that. So I personally, and this is probably going to get a lot of
Speak your truth, Tawny. Speak your truth.
no, it's actually interesting because mom and dad growing up,
controversy.
they've always
Sorry,
been
that's the
like,
word that I was looking for.
"Tara, Tara's just honest. And I think that was just like a cover up because like Tara doesn't think before she speaks, you know? And to truly, it wasn't the best thing to kind of brush aside and be like, she's just honest. You just have to accept that about her. Yeah, I do sometimes have a hard time not thinking before I speak, and I can be blunt, but I think if you don't like that, you can be honest and tell me, like, can you watch what you say to me? Like, think before you speak to me. And I'll be like, oh, yeah, you're right. It's okay. And people who are fine with it are fine with it, you know?
Actually, I have a really funny story about that mom told me recently. We were talking about this situation when I guess we had picked roses or something, and I decided to write on mine with a marker to mark that it was my rose. And my rose ended up dying after we had gone to church, come back, and my rose died, and I was really upset about it. And Mom said that Dallas
I feel like I remember this.
I don't remember it, but Dallas says to me, well, like something along the lines of like, well, you shouldn't have written on it with the marker. That was like a mistake. And I was so mad at him. And I was like, Dallas, think before you speak. And I just like stormed off because I was so upset. And Mom told me,
Leave the room.
Yeah,
that's for a long time to think before you speak.
I think it's definitely very interesting because I tend to be a more blunt person, but I feel like I do it in a different way than Tara does.
Yeah.
Like Tara tends to like just, say stuff like pretty spur of the moment, I would say. Whereas like me, I'm like I'm building up. And I'm
Tony is a
gathering.
teapot. Yes.
I am gathering the information and I'm going to come correct if I'm going to say something. But then once it comes out, it's total annihilation instead of just bluntness.
Just the shock instead of just the shock factor. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, no. I think for a very long time before I say anything, most of the time. And that can get translated into, oh, like she doesn't care, or she's not taking this seriously because she hasn't responded or hasn't said anything. But I'm like, what should I say and how do I feel and what's the best way for me to put this so that it comes across the way that it needs to be come across. So I'm like, because I'm not just thinking about me, I'm thinking about them and like how they communicate and what am I going to say that's not going to be offensive to them because I know how they're going to receive it. And so it's very exhausting. And also it sucks because sometimes it leads you to being the person who is like, "Oh, dang it, I should have said that in the moment," right? Like, dang it, that would have been the perfect thing to say. But I don't think about it until after the fact and the moment's gone and everything's awkward. So,
Yeah. The moment's fast. You can't.
Teddy comes back. And another thing.
no, you go away.
Yeah, it really is so interesting. You can't ever assume someone communicates similarly to you or that they'll take what you said to mean what you said. Like, everybody interprets things differently. And truly, you have to understand those people if you're going to be around them a lot and learn other people's communication. Doesn't mean you have to change your communication necessarily, but you also need to be accepting of how other people communicate.
Cognizant of how they might hear it and receive it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. You should, I take that back. You should always strive to improve how you communicate and how people perceive you. Is what
Don't
I'm
have
going to say
change.
because I'm not
Stay the same.
excusing those. Yeah, I'm not excusing those people who are like, I just speak my truth. We're not excusing you. You need to grow. You need to develop.
Yes. Takes you back to glass onion once again.
Yep.
Don't confuse honesty with speaking without thinking.
It's a dangerous thing to mistake speaking without thought for speaking the truth.
No, I think it's really important. I think you know, it's important to understand and to not use people's words against them because some people say things that they don't mean and recognizing when that happens and when it doesn't happen, and being like, do you mean this? Or, is that actually how you feel? And sometimes they'll be like, yes. And sometimes they'll be like, no, I just feel this way. And that's why I said this thing. Right. And so, like, kind of allowing that margin of error for in communication between peoples, between cultures, between, personality types. But yeah, that's my feelings on communication.
I think that's something
And
where when there are people who do that, who do communicate like that, my thing is that I have to learn to ask further questions to get the full story before being like, "Why the heck did you say that?" Or
yeah.
like, "What makes you think that that's real?" And then like the ones that really get me, the ones that get me are the ones who they're saying something one day, and then the next day you bring it up and they're like, "No, no, no. And then they like say something new and you're like, "Well, you just said this the other day." And they're like, "Well, I changed my mind." And
And then
I'm
they
like,
say, I didn't mean that. And you're like, well, you said it.
it's the ones who specifically are like, "I changed my mind." And I'm like, From 24 hours ago? How do you do that?"
I mean, I've probably been guilty of that when
Yeah.
people call me out for something previous, and I'm like, I reserve the right to change my mind at any point. 'Cause that's
I reserve the right to contradict myself whenever I feel necessary.
Yeah. If you could just change your name so then people would understand that you changed your mind or something. You're like, no,
Today
today's a different Sarah.
Jekyll. Tomorrow I am
a little
high.
bit schizophrenic.
Just
But
Jekyll high,
ultimately,
Jekyll hide, Jekyll.
Or the multiple personalities. My other personality said that. That wasn't me.
I mean, I wish she could use that as more of an acceptable excuse, but unfortunately.
Have multiple personalities?
Yes.
Without actually,
Absolutely.
having a problem.
Because it's
Like,
like
I know somebody
today,
who did, and it's not that great.
well, it's like today I choose niceness. And then you're like, the next day, I don't think I can hold on to that.
I thought that was just called hormones.
This is like a little watch that shows like changes color based on
A mood.
Like a mood ring.
Like your morning alarm. Today you choose violence.
Yes. but really, like, people's body language will really tell you the truth. So reading people's body language will tell you what you really need to know.
It is true. It is true. That is right.
But this was just a fun little episode on communication and the different perspectives on it. Thanks for joining us on this mini episode. Love you. Bye.
Love you.
Love you,
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Wild&T. This podcast episode was produced and edited by Teddy Chanpoon, Kyron Maciel, and Dallas Hanson. Remember to subscribe, rate, review, and of course, share with your sisters. For more content, you can follow Wild&T on all platforms or our individual socials. See you next week.